My brother pushed me down the stairs to steal Grandma's fortune. He never knew I recorded it all, and the tape ruined his entire life. It was just an accident, my mother insisted while I lay there with broken bones. Then the police played a recording that tore our family apart and ultimately sent my brother to prison. My name is Owen, and I'm 27 years old. Exactly 8 months ago, everything I thought I knew about my life was ripped away in an instant, only to be rebuilt from the ground up on the cold concrete floor of a hospital emergency stairwell. I was sprawled at the bottom of the stairs, struggling to breathe. Every breath felt like someone was driving a dull, rusted blade deeper into my chest. I could taste blood filling my mouth, leaving that unmistakable metallic flavor behind my teeth. My vision blurred as dark spots floated across everything I could see, and my right arm was twisted into a horrifying angle that I knew couldn't be normal. Standing above me at the top of the landing was my 31-year-old brother Dean, looking down like he had just won a war. There wasn't a trace of panic on his face, and he didn't look guilty in the slightest. Instead, he wore a look of complete satisfaction. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead, while he calmly brushed the dust from the sleeves of his expensive designer jacket, the same jacket our parents had bought him for his birthday with money they claimed they didn't have when I asked for help paying my college tuition. "Look at you, Owen," Dean sneered, staring down at me with cold, lifeless eyes. "Always acting like you're perfect. Always making everyone else look bad with your daily hospital visits and those pathetic little homemade care packages. You really think you can walk in and steal what's supposed to be mine?" I tried to push myself off the floor with my left arm, but the pain exploded through my body so violently that everything around me faded into darkness for a second. "Dean?" I gasped, barely able to force the word out. "Grandma's waiting for us. Please help me up." He just stared at me with disgust. "Everything has always been about you, Owen," he snapped as he deliberately stepped closer. "You've done nothing but stand in my way." Then his award-winning performance started. Dean reached into his pocket, pulled out his phone, and transformed completely in the blink of an eye. The smug man who had been standing over me disappeared, replaced by someone who looked terrified and heartbroken. His hands began trembling as if he were in complete shock while he dialed the phone. "Mom, Dad, get to the stairwell now," he cried, his voice breaking with fake panic and perfectly rehearsed tears. Owen fell down the stairs. I tried to grab him, I really did, but I couldn't reach him. He just slipped. "Please hurry, there's so much blood." Less than a minute later, the heavy metal fire doors at the bottom of the stairwell slammed open so hard, they echoed through the building. My parents rushed inside. For one foolish moment, I actually felt relieved. I thought they would help me, call for a doctor, or at least see how badly I was hurt. I couldn't have been more wrong. My mother didn't even glance at the blood spreading beside my head. She ignored my twisted arm and swollen face completely. Instead, she hurried straight past me, her expensive heels clicking against the concrete, and wrapped both arms tightly around Dean. Pulling him close, she kissed his cheek over and over. "Oh my God, Dean, my sweet boy," she sobbed, as if he were the one lying on the floor. "You must have been terrified watching your brother fall like that." "It's okay, sweetheart. You're safe now. Mom's here. Don't look at him. It'll only traumatize you even more." My father slowly made his way down the stairs and stopped right beside me. He never knelt down, never checked if I was breathing, and never even asked if I was okay. He simply stood over me, staring with nothing but disappointment written across his face. "Owen, what were you thinking?" He said with obvious disgust. "Running around in a stairwell at your age? You know your brother has high blood pressure. You could have given him a serious panic attack with a reckless stunt like this. You're always creating unnecessary drama," my father continued. I forced my eyes open and stared at his polished leather shoes. "I didn't fall," I whispered, my voice rough and barely audible through the pain. "I wasn't running. Dean pushed me. He shoved me with both hands." "Don't you dare!" Dean cut in immediately, pressing his face deeper into our mother's shoulder while fake tears streamed down his cheeks. "I tried to save you, Owen. I almost fell down the stairs trying to grab your jacket. How can you lie about something like this? Why do you always have to make me look like the bad guy?" My mother's expression instantly turned cold with anger. "That's enough, Owen. Stop talking right now. Your brother has been through enough without you making up jealous lies to destroy his reputation. You've always been clumsy, and now you're just trying to blame someone else." Before I had the chance to say another word, the stairwell door flew open again. A rapid response medical team rushed in, led by a tall woman in dark blue scrubs. Her badge identified her as Diane, head trauma nurse. She took one look at the situation and immediately switched into professional mode. "What happened here?" Diane asked, her calm but firm voice cutting through the chaos. She ignored my parents completely and knelt beside me, carefully supporting my neck to keep it still. "Our son had an unfortunate accident," my father answered smoothly as he stepped in front of Dean, clearly trying to block him from the nurse's view. He was running up the stairs, ignored the wet floor sign, and lost his footing. His older brother tried to catch him, but couldn't reach him in time. Diane didn't even acknowledge my father's explanation. Her trained eyes examined the position of my body, the distance I'd fallen, the angle of my injuries, and then slowly lifted toward the top landing where Dean stood without a single scratch. She had spent years working in emergency medicine. She knew the difference between someone who slipped by accident and someone who had been violently shoved. "Step back, sir," Diane said firmly without looking away from me. "Do not crowd my patient. We need to stabilize his cervical spine immediately." While the EMTs carefully secured me onto a rigid backboard, another nurse hurried into the stairwell carrying a hospital tablet. She looked shaken. "Nurse Diane, you need to see this right away. Hospital security just flagged footage from this stairwell." "Not now," my mother interrupted sharply, waving her hand dismissively. "This is a private family matter. We're taking Owen to a private clinic that's part of our network. I don't want him treated at this public hospital. Have your staff help us get him to our car." Diane completely ignored her. She took the tablet and silently watched the screen for about 8 seconds. I saw her jaw tighten so hard that a muscle twitched in her cheek. The entire atmosphere in the stairwell suddenly felt ice cold. She handed the tablet back, reached for the radio on her shoulder, and spoke in a calm, controlled voice. "Security, this is Diane. Lock down stairwell C immediately and secure the entire area. I need the original camera footage from the last 20 minutes sent directly to the police liaison's office." She never once took her eyes off my parents. My father's face instantly lost all its color, and every bit of confidence he had vanished. "What footage?" he demanded nervously. "Release my son to us immediately. I'll have my attorney sue this hospital for unlawful detainment." Diane slowly stood to her full height and looked him straight in the eyes. "Sir, every stairwell in this hospital is monitored around the clock with high-definition security cameras. What I just watched was not an accident caused by someone slipping. It was a felony assault. This stopped being a private family matter the moment your son was pushed down those stairs, and no one is leaving this building until the police arrive." I watched Dean stumble backward until his shoulders hit the wall. For the first time, the smug confidence he always wore started falling apart right in front of my eyes. But the truth was, this wasn't the first time he'd hurt me. If you want to understand how my own family could stand there, watch me lying in my own blood, and defend the man who attacked me, you first have to understand the twisted foundation my entire life was built on. Growing up, it felt like we lived in two completely different worlds under the same roof. Dean lived in a world where he was rewarded no matter what he did, while I lived in one where I worked endlessly, sacrificed constantly, and somehow got blamed for everything. Dean was the unquestioned golden child. When he turned 16, my parents dipped into their retirement savings to buy him a brand new Audi. Just 2 days later, he backed it straight into a brick mailbox. Instead of holding him accountable, my father handed me a bucket of soapy water and ordered me to polish out the scratches because, according to him, I'd distracted Dean while he was driving. When my 16th birthday came around, all I got was a handshake and an application for a job at the local hardware store because, as my parents put it, it would build character. Things only got worse when it was time for college. I found out the education fund my grandparents had created for me had been completely emptied. My parents admitted they'd spent the entire $120,000 paying for Dean's extravagant destination wedding in the Maldives, a marriage that completely fell apart less than 10 months later. Meanwhile, I was buried under crushing student loans and forced to work exhausting night shifts just to stay afloat. There was only one person who saw through all of their lies and favoritism: my grandmother, Margaret. She was my father's mother, a fiercely independent woman who had built a multi-million-dollar real estate portfolio entirely on her own. She couldn't stand manipulation, and she had absolutely no patience for Dean's entitled attitude. 14 months earlier, Grandma Margaret underwent a high-risk open-heart surgery and needed full-time care during her 7-month recovery. My family disappeared almost immediately. My father claimed his executive position kept him too busy. My mother insisted her charity galas couldn't be missed. Dean complained that hospitals ruined his creative energy, then packed his bags for a month-long vacation in Tulum. So I stepped in. I broke my apartment lease, moved into Margaret's historic mansion, and made caring for her my entire life. For 6 months, I prepared every meal according to her strict diet, managed her complicated medications, helped bathe her when she was too weak to stand, and still worked my remote job late into the night. During those months, we grew incredibly close. She watched me carefully stretch every paycheck to cover my student loans while also helping her organize the paperwork for her multi-million-dollar estate. 5 months before the stairwell incident, Dean showed up unexpectedly. I was in the kitchen when I heard a loud crash come from Margaret's private office. I ran in and found Dean standing over a filing cabinet he'd forced open, his face red with rage as he gripped a thick legal document in his hands. It was a certified copy of Grandma Margaret's updated will and living trust. "What the hell is this, Owen?" Dean shouted before shoving me hard into a bookshelf. "She's leaving you the mansion, the investments, the cash, everything. You manipulated a sick old woman. That money belongs to me. It's my birthright." Just then, Grandma Margaret appeared in the doorway, leaning heavily on her wooden cane. "Put my private papers down and get out of my house this instant," she ordered, her voice strong enough to silence the room. "Owen didn't manipulate anyone. I changed my will because he's the only person in this family who has even a shred of integrity. And if you ever put your hands on your brother again, I'll make sure you don't receive a single penny from your father's estate either." Dean let the papers fall to the floor, staring at me with pure hatred burning in his eyes. "This isn't over, Owen," he whispered through clenched teeth. That was the moment my life quietly turned into a nightmare. Over the following months, strange and increasingly dangerous accidents started happening every time my family was anywhere near me. At a family barbecue, Dean accidentally bumped into me and sent me flying off the concrete patio straight into a thorny rosebush. At the grocery store, a heavy wooden pallet somehow tipped over exactly where I was standing. 4 weeks earlier at this same hospital, Dean caught my ankle with his foot near a water fountain, sending me face first into the porcelain and leaving me with 8 stitches in my chin. Every single time, my parents laughed it off, dismissed my concerns, and insisted I was just clumsy and accident-prone. Then came today in the hospital stairwell, the day Dean decided little accidents weren't enough anymore. He wanted the obstacle standing between him and Grandma's fortune gone for good. Update 1. The emergency room was a blur of bright lights, rushing staff, and voices shouting over one another. I lay flat on a hard gurney in Trauma Bay 3 with my chest tightly wrapped in heavy bandages. The x-rays had confirmed just how badly I was hurt. 4 broken ribs, a hairline fracture in my collarbone, and a shattered wrist. Even through the thin blue privacy curtain, I could hear my parents arguing furiously in the hallway. "This is ridiculous," my father shouted, slamming his hand against a metal medical cart. "I'm a respected corporate executive. You're not locking our son in a room and questioning him like some criminal. I want Owen's discharge papers processed immediately." Nurse Diane didn't raise her voice. "Your son pushed his brother down a concrete staircase with enough force to break multiple bones," she replied calmly. "The police have already been called, and this is now an active crime scene." A moment later, the privacy curtain was pulled back. Dr. Whitfield, the senior trauma surgeon, stepped into my room with Nurse Diane close behind him, completely ignoring the argument outside. "Owen," Dr. Whitfield said, his face deadly serious, "I need you to answer one question honestly. Are you afraid for your safety if you leave this hospital?" I looked down at my bruised hands while the full weight of everything my family had done settled onto my chest harder than the broken ribs themselves. "I'm living with my grandmother right now," I said quietly, my voice trembling. Nurse Diane stepped closer, still holding the tablet. "While you were in radiology, our risk management team reviewed your medical history. We noticed a very troubling pattern, so we pulled archived security footage from every previous hospital visit you've made with your grandmother." My heart pounded painfully against my cracked ribs. 4 weeks ago, you needed 8 stitches after the water fountain incident. 3 months before that, you came in with a severe ankle sprain from the parking garage. Last month, you were treated for a concussion after the cafeteria incident. We reviewed the high-definition security footage from every one of those cases. The room went completely silent. "What did you find?" I asked softly, even though deep down I already knew. Dr. Whitfield met my eyes. "We found your brother," he said without hesitation. "We watched him deliberately stick his foot out near the water fountain. We watched him shove you from behind in the parking garage. We now have 6 separate incidents on hospital property, all clearly recorded on security cameras. In every single one, Dean was the aggressor, and your parents were standing nearby watching it happen without saying a word." The air seemed to leave my lungs all at once. I'd always known my parents protected Dean, but hearing a doctor confirm that they had repeatedly watched him hurt me and intentionally ignored it shattered something deep inside me. To them, I wasn't their son. I was simply acceptable collateral damage as long as their golden child stayed protected. Suddenly, the curtain was ripped open with enough force to make it sway. My father stormed into the trauma bay, his face burning with anger, while Dean hid nervously behind him. "We're leaving right now," my father snapped, pointing an accusing finger at Dr. Whitfield. "I'm calling my lawyer," my father shouted. "You're about to be hit with the biggest medical malpractice lawsuit this hospital has ever seen." Dr. Whitfield didn't flinch. Standing calmly over my father, he answered with quiet authority. You're not the one making decisions here, sir. Owen is an adult, and as mandatory reporters, we're required to report suspected abuse. That cycle ends today. Cycle ends. My mother pushed past my father and rushed to my bedside. She grabbed my uninjured left hand so tightly that her perfectly manicured nails dug painfully into my skin. Her eyes looked desperate, but beneath the sweetness in her voice was a clear threat. Owen, please, she whispered urgently. Just tell them it was all a misunderstanding. Tell them you tripped over your own shoelaces. If Dean gets arrested, his entire life will be ruined. He'll lose everything. You know how he is. He just loses his temper sometimes. Please, and for the sake of this family, be the bigger person. I looked straight into the eyes of the woman who had raised me, listening as she begged me to ignore my broken body and years of abuse just to protect her favorite son. For 25 years, I had carried all the pain, so our family could keep pretending everything was normal. But something inside me finally snapped. The fear I'd lived with for decades burned away in an instant. I jerked my hand free from hers. No, I said firmly, my voice steady for the first time in years. My mother gasped and stumbled backward as though I'd actually hit her. Owen, what are you doing? She whispered. I'm done, I replied, locking eyes with my father. I'm done being the person everyone sacrifices to protect Dean. He didn't accidentally push me. He tried to kill me because he wanted Grandma's inheritance. Then I turned toward Nurse Diane. Call the police. Give them every piece of evidence you've got. I want to press every criminal charge possible. You ungrateful little bastard, Dean roared, instantly dropping his helpless victim act. He charged toward me with his fists clenched, but before he could get close, Dr. Whitfield shoved him hard into the metal doorframe. At the same moment, a large hospital security officer stepped into the room, resting one hand on his duty belt as he forced Dean back into the hallway. About 15 minutes later, Detective Monroe walked into Trauma Bay 3. She carried herself with the confidence of someone who had spent years dealing with violent crimes. After officers escorted my parents and Dean into a separate holding area, she pulled up a chair beside my bed. I told her everything from beginning to end. The shove down the stairs, Dean's threats, the fake emergency phone call, the fight over Grandma's inheritance, and the long string of suspicious accidents that had been happening for months. Detective Monroe wrote everything down carefully before looking up at me with a professional expression. Inheritance disputes are a common motive, she said. But I want to be honest with you, Owen. It's extremely difficult to prove criminal intent in a fall like this. A skilled defense attorney will argue it was nothing more than a fight between siblings. Convincing the district attorney to pursue attempted murder would be a huge legal leap. Almost as if he'd been waiting outside, a sharply dressed man wearing an expensive custom Italian suit walked confidently into my room. It was Bennett, the ruthless corporate attorney my father had kept on retainer for years. Detective Monroe, Bennett said with a polished smile that felt completely fake, I officially represent Dean and his parents. We're demanding my client be released immediately. There is absolutely no credible physical evidence that a crime occurred here. Only the accusations of a deeply unstable sibling with a long, well-documented history of serious mental health issues. My stomach dropped. Mental health issues? Bennett shifted his cold gaze toward me. My client's brother has been under extraordinary stress while acting as the primary caregiver for an elderly dementia patient. We are fully prepared to present highly qualified medical experts who will testify that he is suffering from paranoia, caregiver burnout, and delusional thinking. He aggressively confronted my client in the stairwell, lost his balance during the altercation, and fell. Dean heroically attempted to catch him, but was unsuccessful. This was a tragic accident, not a criminal act. Detective Monroe quietly folded her arms, waiting to hear what came next. We have high-definition security footage that clearly shows your client pushing his brother, Mr. Bennett, Detective Monroe said. Bennett answered with nothing more than a cold, calculated smile. Video without audio is open to interpretation, Detective. All anyone will see is two brothers struggling on a staircase. If you arrest my client based on evidence that weak, I'll personally file a multi-million-dollar defamation lawsuit against this hospital, your department, and this young man. The entire room went silent. My parents had brought in the biggest legal weapon they could find, hoping to intimidate everyone into backing down. Just as Detective Monroe was about to respond, a young man in a hospital IT uniform hurried into the room, breathing hard. It was Tyler, the hospital's lead security technician. He held up a small silver USB drive like he'd found buried treasure. Excuse me, Detective, Tyler said, completely ignoring the expensive attorney glaring at him. Nurse Diane asked me to retrieve the original files from the Stairwell C security system. It was marked as a code red priority. We already have the video, Monroe replied. Yes, ma'am, I know. Tyler answered as he plugged the USB drive into Diane's tablet. But Stairwell C is one of the older emergency exits. Last month, the hospital upgraded the entire security system there to include high-definition environmental audio recording for fire safety monitoring. I've spent the last 25 minutes extracting and cleaning up the raw audio so the voices could be separated from the background echo. Bennett's confident smile disappeared instantly. He stepped forward. I object. That recording is completely illegal. It's an unauthorized wiretap inside a private facility. A public hospital stairwell carries no reasonable expectation of privacy, counselor. Monroe fired back without hesitation. Then she looked at Tyler. Play it. Tyler tapped the screen. A faint electronic hiss filled the room, followed by the echo of the empty stairwell. Then Dean's voice came through the speakers, perfectly clear. But it wasn't our conversation before he shoved me. It was a phone call he'd made about 12 minutes earlier, while pacing alone at the top of the stairs, waiting for me to arrive. I don't care what Dad says. Dean's recorded voice snapped with obvious hatred. I'm not letting that little rat take the house. It's prime historic real estate. If the old bat dies and he gets control of the trust, I'm screwed. Listen to me. One more accident should finish this for good. I'm going to push him down the concrete stairs in stairwell C. It's a blind corner. I'll tell everyone he slipped and I tried to catch him. After the injuries, he'll either be too scared to fight for the inheritance or too brain damaged to challenge me in probate court. I'm taking care of the problem right now. Just make sure the lawyer's ready. The recording ended with a soft click. The silence that followed was almost unbearable. It felt like every bit of air had been pulled from the room. Bennett stood frozen, staring at the tablet with every trace of color gone from his face. Without saying a word, he slowly reached down, closed the gold clasps on his expensive leather briefcase, and let out a quiet sigh. He was an experienced shark, and he recognized a sinking ship the second he saw one. Detective Monroe rose to her feet with a grim look of satisfaction. Subjective video, Mr. Bennett? She said calmly. Severe paranoia? Your client just gave us a crystal-clear confession to premeditated attempted murder. He laid out the financial motive, described exactly how he planned to do it, and openly stated his intent. Bennett didn't even try to argue. He simply gave a tight nod, turned on his polished heels, and walked out of the trauma bay, leaving my family behind to face the consequences alone. Detective Monroe calmly removed a pair of heavy steel handcuffs from her duty belt. As they clicked together in her hands, the sound felt like freedom for the first time in my life. Hang in there, Owen, Detective Monroe said. The real storm is about to hit that hallway. Update 2. I honestly believed the audio recording would be the final piece of evidence that ended this nightmare once and for all. I couldn't have been more wrong. The biggest bombshell was still on its way, and it was coming from the one person my parents feared more than anyone else alive. My parents were still sitting in a small, windowless holding room near the cafeteria, completely unaware that Dean had just confessed to attempted murder on a recorded phone call. They honestly believed Marcus Bennett was out in the hallway intimidating the detective into dropping the case. They had no idea that true judgment was already making its way toward them. Then I heard it, the steady squeak of a heavy-duty hospital wheelchair rolling through the otherwise silent hallway. Nurse Diane pulled back the blue privacy curtain just as the wheelchair came around the corner. Sitting there in a simple hospital gown, yet carrying herself like an untouchable queen, entering her throne room was Grandma Margaret. Even after her recent open-heart surgery, her back was perfectly straight. Her silver hair was neatly pinned in place, and her piercing blue eyes burned with calm, controlled fury. Standing beside her was Dr. Eris, while on her other side stood a tall, imposing man in a perfectly tailored charcoal suit carrying a thick black leather binder under his arm. Owen, Grandma Margaret said, her voice slightly weak but still carrying unmistakable authority. Her eyes immediately settled on my bandaged chest and shattered wrist. For a split second, I saw genuine heartbreak cross her face before it disappeared beneath a look of absolute determination. I promised you I would protect you, and I'm deeply sorry it came to this. Before I could answer, the double doors slammed open. My parents had apparently convinced a young security guard to let them out of the holding area, and they marched confidently down the hallway toward my room. Dean followed closely behind them, still wearing that smug, untouchable grin, completely unaware that his recorded confession had already destroyed his future. Owen, this ridiculous circus has gone on long enough, my father announced loudly as his expensive shoes echoed across the floor. He hadn't even noticed Grandma Margaret yet. We tried calling Bennett, but his secretary claimed he had an emergency. Whatever lies you filled his head with don't matter. We're leaving, and tomorrow you're going to contact the district attorney and withdraw your statement. If you don't, I'll personally make sure you never find a respectable job anywhere in this city again. Are you quite finished embarrassing yourself, Gerald? The voice sliced through the hallway like the crack of a whip. My father froze in the middle of his sentence. Every bit of confidence drained from his face as he slowly turned around. His eyes widened in absolute horror when he finally saw his mother sitting directly in front of my hospital room like an immovable wall. "Mother," he stammered, his face turning ghostly pale. "What are you doing here? You shouldn't be out of bed with your heart condition." Grandma Margaret didn't blink. "My heart is functioning just fine, Gerald," she replied coldly. "It's my soul that's sick after seeing the kind of man you've become." Her voice carried through the emergency department, and it seemed like everyone nearby stopped what they were doing to watch. My mother quickly forced an awkward smile onto her face. "Margaret, please," she said sweetly. "Owen just had an unfortunate accident on the stairs." Dean tried to catch him. "This is simply a private family matter, and we're handling it." Grandma Margaret slowly turned her eyes toward my mother. The disgust in her expression was so intense that my mother instinctively took a step backward. "A private family matter?" Grandma Margaret repeated quietly, her voice filled with dangerous calm. "You stand there wearing thousands of dollars in diamond jewelry that was paid for by my late husband's company, and you're still willing to lie straight to my face." Grandma Margaret said coldly, "Did you really think I had no idea what the three of you have been doing behind my back all this time? You disgusting parasites." Dean let out a mocking laugh and folded his arms. "Grandma, you need to calm down. Owen's just pretending to be the victim again, so you'll hand him even more money. He's completely lost it." Grandma Margaret didn't even raise her voice. Instead, she calmly lifted one frail hand and snapped her fingers. The tall man in the charcoal suit immediately stepped forward and opened the thick, black leather binder he had been carrying. "Gerald, Carol, Dean," Grandma Margaret said, speaking with the calm authority of a CEO taking control of a company, "I'd like you to meet Mr. Whitmore. He's a senior forensic accountant and a former federal prosecutor. I hired his private investigative firm 11 months ago. Every bit of color disappeared from my parents' faces. They looked like people who had just realized the verdict had already been decided." 11 months ago?" my father whispered, barely able to get the words out. "Yes, Gerald," Grandma Margaret replied without a hint of sympathy. "Around the time I noticed Owen showing up at my house every day to cook my meals, while covered in bruises he couldn't explain, and carrying the constant look of someone living in fear. Around the same time, Dean suddenly found the money for first-class luxury vacations, despite claiming he was broke. I'm not blind, Gerald, but even I didn't understand just how rotten the three of you had become until Mr. Whitmore started delivering his weekly reports." Mr. Whitmore adjusted his glasses, opened the binder, and began reading in a firm, professional voice. "Over the past 11 months, our investigation has documented 4 separate incidents in which Dean intentionally destroyed Owen's personal property. We have also subpoenaed financial records proving that Gerald and Carol illegally diverted a federally protected college fund established by Margaret for Owen and used the money to finance Dean's luxury destination wedding. In addition, we've obtained time-stamped security footage from a grocery store, a country club, and this hospital's parking garage. Those recordings clearly show Dean deliberately causing physical harm to Owen on 5 separate occasions, while Gerald and Carol were present and actively concealed his actions." My mother's knees suddenly gave out beneath her. She let out a weak gasp before collapsing against the hallway wall and slowly sliding onto the linoleum floor with one hand clutching her chest. "Mother, please," my father begged, genuine tears finally filling his eyes. Not because of what they'd done to me, but because he knew everything they had built was falling apart. We were only trying to protect Dean. A criminal investigation would destroy his future. You can't do this to your own family. Grandma Margaret's eyes burned with fury. You made your choice about family the moment you stood there, watched Owen bleeding on that concrete floor, and ordered him to stay quiet so you could protect a violent criminal, she shot back. You honestly believed you could wait for me to die, intimidate Owen into giving up his inheritance, and then walk away with everything I spent my life building. She turned toward Mr. Whitmore without taking her eyes off my parents. "Give them the final documents." Mr. Whitmore removed 3 thick manila envelopes from the binder and calmly handed one to my father, one to my sobbing mother, and one to Dean, who stood frozen in place. "What is this?" Dean demanded, his hand trembling as he tore open the envelope and pulled out a thick stack of heavily notarized legal documents. Grandma Margaret looked at him with the first satisfied smile I'd seen on her face all day. "That," she said calmly, "is your new reality. As of 8 o'clock this morning, my legal team officially finalized every one of those documents. My entire estate, including every historic property, my stock portfolio, the holding company, and every dollar I own, has now been permanently transferred into an irrevocable trust," Grandma Margaret announced. The sole beneficiary and trustee of that trust is Owen. My father let the thick envelope slip from his hands. The legal papers scattered across the hallway floor. An irrevocable trust couldn't simply be changed, challenged, or overturned in probate court. The inheritance was now protected behind a legal wall that none of them could ever break through. And there's more, Grandma Margaret continued, her voice calm but final. As of today, I have legally severed every financial and business connection between us, Gerald. The suburban home you're living in belongs to my holding company. I've already signed the eviction notice. You have exactly 45 days to move out. Your monthly allowance has been permanently terminated. Every corporate credit card has been canceled. Your seat on my board of directors has been revoked. From this moment forward, you are completely and legally cut off. Dean stared down at the stack of legal documents in disbelief. The realization hit him all at once. He was suddenly broke, about to lose his home, and facing multiple felony charges. His privileged world had collapsed in seconds. "You can't do this to me," Dean screamed as he crushed the papers in his hands and lunged toward Grandma Margaret's wheelchair. "That money belongs to me. I'm the firstborn grandson. I'll sue you for everything you've got." He barely made it a few steps before Detective Monroe emerged from the hallway with two large uniformed police officers at her side. "Dean," Detective Monroe said firmly, her voice cutting through his outburst, "turn around and place your hands behind your back." Dean stopped in his tracks. His eyes darted toward the officers before he desperately turned to my parents. "Mom! Dad! Do something. Call Bennett. Tell them they're making a mistake. I didn't do anything." Detective Monroe answered before either of them could speak. "Marcus Bennett officially withdrew as your attorney about 20 minutes ago. The moment he heard the high-definition audio recording of you planning your brother's murder, he decided he was no longer representing you. He doesn't defend clients who confess on tape." "Audio recording?" my mother whispered, her face completely drained of color. "What? Audio recording?" Detective Monroe looked at her without the slightest hint of sympathy. "Stairwell C is equipped with high-definition audio recording. We have your son clearly recorded 12 minutes before the assault describing his plan to push Owen down the concrete stairs, seriously injure him, and force him to surrender his inheritance. It's a textbook confession to premeditated attempted murder." My father staggered backward as though someone had punched him square in the chest. He looked over at Dean, who had completely fallen apart. The untouchable golden child of the family was now crying uncontrollably while the officers spread his legs apart and secured his arms behind his back. "Mom, Dad, please." Dean sobbed as the steel handcuffs snapped shut around his wrists. "I didn't mean it. I swear I didn't mean for it to happen like this. I only wanted to scare him. Please, you've got to help me." My mother rushed toward him, but my father suddenly grabbed her arm and yanked her backwards so hard she nearly lost her balance. At that moment, pure survival instinct took over. Gerald realized that standing beside Dean now meant destroying whatever little chance he had left to save himself. "Gerald, let me go!" my mother cried. "They're taking our son!" My mother cried out, "Let me go, Carol!" My father immediately snapped back, his voice shaking with pure panic. "Shut your mouth, Carol. Do you even understand what's happening right now? He's on a police recording openly discussing a murder plan. If we say one wrong thing defending him, they can charge us as accomplices. We need to separate ourselves from him immediately if we want any chance of protecting ourselves." I watched the entire scene unfold from my hospital bed. The moment their protective shield of wealth and influence disappeared, they turned against each other like desperate animals fighting for survival. My father, the man who spent years calling Dean his pride and joy, was now willing to sacrifice his own son without hesitation, just to protect himself. As the officers escorted Dean down the hallway, he suddenly stopped fighting for a brief moment and looked directly at me. His eyes were wide with fear, and for the first time in my life, I saw him completely powerless. There was no arrogance, no smug confidence, no sense of control, only pure terror. He opened his mouth as if he wanted to say something, but I didn't want to hear a single word. I slowly lifted my uninjured hand, grabbed the edge of the blue privacy curtain beside my bed, and pulled it closed with one sharp motion. The curtain slid shut, cutting him off from my world forever. 6 months later, the consequences of everything that happened were brutal and completely unforgiving. Once Dean lost the protection of his family's money and influence, he collapsed quickly under the pressure of a district attorney armed with a flawless audio confession. Without my father's endless resources to hire an expensive defense attorney, Dean was left with an overworked public defender who gave him one simple piece of advice: take the plea deal. Dean eventually pleaded guilty to felony aggravated assault with a deadly weapon, the concrete staircase, and admitted to acting with the intention of causing serious physical harm. He received a mandatory minimum sentence of 7 years in a maximum security state prison. followed by 6 years of strict probation. I never went to his sentencing hearing. As for my parents, Grandma Margaret kept every promise she made. She followed through and removed them from the large 5-bedroom suburban mansion they had called home for 22 years. Once my father's generous monthly allowance disappeared and his executive position was gone, he discovered that finding another high-level job wasn't nearly as easy as he thought. His reputation in our city's close corporate circles was destroyed after the abuse allegations reached the local media. To avoid complete financial collapse, my parents had to make painful changes. They sold their luxury vehicles, auctioned off my mother's expensive diamond jewelry, and moved into a small 2-bedroom apartment in one of the noisiest parts of the city. I ignored every single message they sent me, begging to repair our relationship. Meanwhile, I had recovered physically and was living peacefully in Grandma Margaret's historic home. With Mr. Whitmore's guidance, I began learning how to manage the massive real estate company and preserve everything my grandmother had built. I also convinced Margaret to dedicate a significant portion of her liquid assets toward creating a scholarship and housing program for young adults who had survived domestic and financial abuse. I decided I wasn't going to let my worst experiences destroy me. I was going to use them to create something meaningful. But yesterday, one final surprise arrived at my door. It was a slightly wrinkled white envelope covered in official red stamps from the Maximum Security State Correctional Facility. The return address belonged to Dean. I opened it carefully and unfolded the letter inside. It said, "Owen, I'm not writing this because I expect you to forgive me. Spending 22 hours a day inside a 9x11 concrete cell changes a person. I'm writing because I owe you the truth about how things got this far. Yes, I was angry about the inheritance, but I need you to understand something. I wasn't the only person pushing this forward. I wasn't the only one whispering in your ear. And I wasn't the only one who wanted you gone. 7 months before the stairwell incident, our cousin Marcus had been calling my phone almost every single day. He worked as a paralegal at a downtown law firm, and somehow he illegally accessed Grandma's private estate documents. He was the one constantly feeding me lies, telling me that you were planning to throw Mom and Dad out onto the street the second Grandma passed away just to punish all of us. He kept saying things like, if Owen wasn't around, you'd inherit everything. I could help you manage the portfolio, and we could both become incredibly wealthy. He kept winding me up like some cheap toy, pointing all of my anger directly at you. He wanted us to destroy each other so he could step in afterward as the caring, supportive family member and manipulate Grandma into giving him control of the trust. I was the one who made the choice in that stairwell, and I was the one who destroyed my own life. But you need to be careful, Owen. Marcus is the real snake hiding in the grass. He's still out there pretending to be the good guy, waiting for the perfect moment to make his move. Stay safe. Dean. The moment I finished reading the letter, everything suddenly made sense. Cousin Marcus, the quiet, helpful, almost forgettable relative who had immediately sent me a message while I was lying injured in the hospital, offering his sympathy, had been the hidden mastermind behind everything. He had spent months feeding Dean's already dangerous ego, encouraging his greed, and pushing him toward a catastrophic decision, all because he wanted to collect whatever was left after the family destroyed itself. A year earlier, that revelation would have terrified me. I would have felt trapped beneath the weight of a family tree filled with manipulation, betrayal, and selfishness. But sitting there inside the historic home that legally belonged to me, protected by an unbreakable trust and surrounded by a team of powerful attorneys, I didn't feel afraid anymore. I didn't feel angry either. All I felt was sadness and pity. Every single one of them had spent their lives fighting a cruel, pointless game where everyone was willing to destroy each other for money they never earned. They were sacrificing their own happiness, chasing something that was never truly theirs. And I was finally done participating. Without hesitation, I walked over to the large stone fireplace where a small fire quietly burned and dropped Dean's letter straight into the hottest part of the flames. Let Marcus live with his failed plans. Let him wonder why he never received a single dollar. If he ever decides to come after us, Mr. Whitmore and the legal team can handle him. I refuse to waste another moment of my life chasing the toxic memories and broken people who had never truly cared about me. Sometimes reaching the absolute lowest point of your life, lying on a cold concrete floor, believing everything is over, is the exact moment you discover what you're truly made of. You can't heal in the same environment that spent years hurting you. My name is Owen. I'm 27 years old. I survived the family that tried to break me, and for the first time in my entire life, I finally know where I belong.